everyone, and thank you so much to all our friends from the Noir community and all of the communities from different faith traditions that we've had the honor of working with. Thank you all for joining us today for this very important event. I want to begin by acknowledging that this land on which we gather here today has been the territory of indigenous nations for many thousands of years, and this land in particular has most recently been the territory of the Mississaugas of New Credit First Nation. Even as we are gathered here today to discuss the subject of the genocide and persecution being perpetrated against the Rohingya and Uyghur people, we need to remember that those same violences of genocide, religious and racial persecution are the very foundations upon which this Canadian state was built. And so even as we issue these land acknowledgements, we must also remember our obligation to continue to work together in solidarity with Indigenous communities towards a decolonized future. This event is part of World Interfaith Harmony Week, and we are delighted to have Michelle Singh here from the World Interfaith Harmony Week Toronto Steering Committee. So I'm going to ask her to come up to the podium and offer a few words of welcome, and then we'll get into the rest of the program, inshallah. Michelle.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. As Khadija,
Wrong sister.
Sorry.
Get it straight.
Oh, it's been a long day. Thank you for welcoming me. I appreciate being here tonight. As I am the Vice Chair of the Toronto Steering Committee for World Interfaith Harmony Week. And we have been, Noir Cultural Center has been a part of our programming since I think 2013. And each year, the wonderful ladies here always put on a powerful program that relates to the issues that we are dealing with in the world right now. World Interfaith Harmony Week was started in 2010. It's a UN resolution, and it is celebrated globally February 1st to 7th. In Toronto, we've been celebrating since 2012, and programming has ranged for everything from earlier today, I was at a Blue community, the only religious Blue community in Canada, the Sisters of St. Joseph, who invited Indigenous water protectors to come and share about the importance of water in their community. And it was a fantastic afternoon. Later this week, our programming includes looking at violence against women. We have a celebration of the Parliament of the World's Religions, which I think some of you attended in November, continuing to build on the success of that. We continue to develop programming. We invite you to visit interfaithtoronto.ca to have a look at what else is available. Thank you again for welcoming us, and thank you again, the Kanji family at Noir Cultural Center, for hosting this evening.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and don't worry about mixing me up with my sister. There are many people I'd be offended to be mixed up with, but my sister is not one of them, so we're good.
Well done.
Tonight's event is occurring at a confluence of several important and significant dates in our calendar. As Michelle has noted, this week is World Interfaith Harmony Week, a time when we not only as interfaith communities get together to repair our relationships with one another, but when we also work together to repair the harm that we have caused in the world, what our Jewish friends refer to as tikkun olam, healing the world. On Tuesday, January 29th, Canada also marked the 2-year anniversary of the Quebec mosque shooting, which killed 6 and injured many others, a devastating reminder of the deadly effects that hate and racism and religious phobia can have when those tentacles are allowed to spread in our society. And on Sunday, January 27th, the world marked International Holocaust Remembrance Day, an occasion when we must not only reflect on the mentalities that would allow humans to perpetrate such atrocities and crimes against other humans, but also reflect on the weaknesses in our political and moral systems that permitted so many to stand by and allow such crimes to happen, even as they unfolded in full sight and knowledge of the international community. The eminent scholar of genocide, settler colonialism, and racism, Patrick Wolfe, observed in his latest book, Traces of History, that genocide frequently proceeds through methods that on the face appear to be contradictory or antithetical to each other, but are united by an underlying logic of elimination. For the indigenous peoples in the Americas, or Turtle Island, for example, genocide occurred both through processes of expulsion and extrusion, as well as through processes of forced assimilation, united by the underlying desire to eliminate indigenous people as a people. In what is happening to the Rohingya and Uyghur communities in Myanmar and China respectively today, we see these two logics at work. The Rohingya have been expelled from their homelands and from their houses, forced to flee into Bangladesh, while the Uyghurs have been internally incarcerated in concentration camps, their minds subject to efforts by the Chinese government to internally colonize them and brainwash them. Recently, our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau apologized for Canada's decision to turn back Jewish refugees who are fleeing the horrors from the Holocaust. And we know from the landmark book by Irving Abella and Harold Troper, None is Too Many, that Canada's failure to offer refuge to Jewish refugees was not due to a deficit of information about what was happening in Germany. The Canadian government knew and had information about what was being done to the Jewish people. The deficit was not of information, but of political will. And so we thank you, all of you today, for coming here for this event to learn about the situations that are happening in China and Myanmar to the Uyghur and Rohingya people, and also what actions we can take to set our politics on a course where we do not permit what we promise to happen never again to happen again and again. For the rest of this evening, we'll begin by showing two short clips about the current situations, about what is happening to the Uyghur and the Rohingya, and then I will offer some brief remarks to set the shared context for these exercises of persecution, and then we will have a panel of experts from the Rohingya and Uyghur community, as well as human rights advocacy, to delve into some of the issues, to answer some of our questions, and to further deepen our understanding of the context, as well as actions that we can take in building solidarity with these beleaguered communities. So we'll start with the films. Yeah, thanks.
Look at this. It's like a city. That's it, that's your hand.
Volume good? Yeah.
We don't know yet.
Yeah. Okay, yes, there.
In Xinjiang, displays of police might are everywhere. But there's something here they don't want you to see. Huge fences all around it, though. Behind these blue steel walls, in a former school, is what China calls a vocational training center. But it looks more like a prison. Nearby, relatives queue up to visit. From above, the grim details can be picked out. Last year, the school had a football pitch. Today, it's covered with what look like accommodation blocks. Watchtowers are visible. On a corner, just outside the camp fence, we stop to speak to a family.
What are you guys doing here?
Some officials try to stop us filming, but another intervenes. Let them speak, she says. I ask who they're visiting. My dad, he replies. Xinjiang's main Muslim minority are known as the Uyghurs. We find many of their homes locked and deserted. Sinister official notices on the doors say the missing are being looked after. One credible estimate suggests up to 1 million people may now be detained. But the BBC has seen new, detailed satellite analysis of dozens of suspected camps across Xinjiang. Few of them look much like schools. This giant compound is surrounded by a high wall with 16 watchtowers. We try to approach the site by car. Look at this. Only to discover that it's being expanded on a massive scale. It's like a city. Then the police block our way. If this really is all about education, then why the effort to stop us getting close?
Impressive thing is that
the satellite analysts show us a more recent image. It's clear how much the site has grown.
everything double.
But the team is able to show that this one camp is part of something much bigger by identifying many other similar secure facilities right across Xinjiang. Plotting their growth over time shows just how fast they're being built.
Satellites see beyond what the human eye can see. As the years pass, we have detected that the number of infrastructures being built increases, and most significantly in the past 2 years.
And prison design experts tell us this could now be one of the biggest detention facilities in the world, holding 11,000 inmates at the very least. China denies it is detaining Muslims in Xinjiang. In response to the allegations, state TV has been showing classrooms of supposedly grateful adults willing undergoing re-education. Without this, I might have followed religious extremists, this woman says. From a vegetable field to another one of China's new schools in less than 6 months, complete with watchtowers. We try to film one of them, but once again, while trying to get to the truth, we're asked to leave. Wow, look at this. It's like a city. In Xinjiang, displays of police might are everywhere. But there's something here they don't want you to see. Huge fences all around it, though. Behind these blue steel walls, in a former school, is what China calls a vocational training center. But it looks more like a prison. Nearby, relatives queue up to visit. From above, the grim details can be picked out. Last year, the school had a football pitch. Today, it's covered with what look like accommodation blocks. What?
Okay, sorry about that, but now you all know the material doubly well. So, to move on to our next video.
It's been a year since 700,000 Rohingya Muslims began streaming out of northern Rakhine State in Buddhist-majority Myanmar, turning this stretch of Bangladesh into the world's largest refugee camp. Today, the UN released a report saying the Rohingya were fleeing state-sponsored genocide, the most serious charge that the UN can make against a government. The report calls for Myanmar's top generals, including the Commander-in-Chief, to face prosecution. Myanmar has justified the crackdown as a response to attacks by Rohingya insurgents, and the government continues to deny all accusations of ethnic cleansing. Rosina says she was 16 when the soldiers came to her village. They burned homes, tortured and executed the men, and raped the women. She asked to cover her face with a veil and to use a different name. The military says women like Rosina invented their claims, but she lives with the evidence. Rosina fled to the camps with members of her family, relying on limited aid and surviving monsoons and disease outbreaks. Now a 17-year-old single mother, she faces an additional hardship. Her relatives have refused to accept her child. She's now just trying to get by until she can go back to her village in Myanmar. Here, refugees live in overcrowded conditions in an already overpopulated country, and Bangladesh is eager to find a long-term solution. In May, the UN secretly brokered a deal between Myanmar and Bangladesh to pave the way for the Rohingya to return. But the refugees weren't consulted. Mohibullah, who was a teacher before he fled Myanmar a year ago, says they want the military to be held to account before they can go back. He and his volunteers have been gathering data, images and eyewitness testimonies in hopes of building a case for the International Criminal Court.
How many cases do you know about of rape?
Every day, 1,834 cases.
According to Mohibullah's records, the village of Tulatoli, also known as Menji, suffered one of the worst massacres.
This place?
That's Tulatoli. And this is where 850 killed, 127 raped. So you're saying it's very organized. The military says...
Someone knows.
You don't think they could have been acting by themselves?
Yeah. They cannot shoot one bullet without order.
How do you get any kind of legal justice for that? There's no way to have information about the people who perpetrated this crime.
We know the people. BGB Sector 4, Battalion 99, 20, 230.
So you know which units?
Yeah, this is Unit 98. Now we have enough evidence. We already sent through to Bangladesh, to the ICC.
What do you want from the ICC?
To take the action according to law.
Like Mohibullah, human rights organizations are also building a case for the ICC. But Myanmar isn't a signatory to the treaty that would put it under the jurisdiction of the ICC. And investigators haven't even been given access to northern Rakhine State, where the killings took place. To show us they had nothing to hide, Myanmar's government invited us on a rare trip for foreign journalists. Handlers escorted us through a carefully orchestrated 3-day agenda. The first stop was a border district where many Rohingya refugees used to live.
Hello, ready? Ready, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1,
The Rohingya want to return here, provided that the authorities take steps to ensure that the persecution doesn't continue. But right now, this official, an administrator for a district where mass killings took place, won't admit anything like that happened at all.
What's your response to claims that there was a deliberate strategy to push the Muslim residents of this area?
Generally, Muslim I don't know if people set out. I really
Did you see villages being burned?
When we managed to get away from our handlers and convoy, we saw why the Rohingya feel they have little to return to.
So we just drove past a site that looked like it used to be a village. We're just going to walk in and see if we can get close to it. These are all places that used to be houses here, but they've been completely destroyed. There's nobody here at all. One of the things we heard about with Rohingya villages in this part of Rakhine State was that they were burned down to make sure that the Rohingya didn't come back. So you can actually see here in the corner, there's some ripped up pages of the Quran, so this is definitely what used to be a mosque.
We also tried to get to that village of Minji, also known as Tulatoli, where reports said a large-scale massacre took place.
So our contacts in the refugee camps in Bangladesh have just sent us over WhatsApp a map of the village of Tulatoli, where they say this massacre took place. They've actually drawn the site of where the mass grave is containing the bodies of those that were killed.
We were able to find the crossroads for the village, but our driver refused to turn.
So it's Minji. Minji.
The handler came back for us when he saw us stop.
So that's the tunnel for Minji. It's really important that we go there. We'd really like to see it, and it's a place that we've asked for repeatedly.
So this time we have no time.
Are they hiding something in this place? Is there something they don't want us to see?
They want to go there. I
know that.
I know that.
Why does nobody go there?
I don't know exactly, but
that's why we want to go there, because nobody's been. That's a place that is important for us.
But this place, we are not suddenly changed to plan.
We were unable to reach the alleged mass graves, just like other outside observers. What the officials did want to show is that they had built fully staffed reception centres and were totally prepared to welcome the refugees back. The UN has repeatedly criticised Myanmar authorities for failing to ensure conditions are safe for the Rohingya. But immigration officials say it's not their fault that the refugees haven't returned.
Can you guys understand why they might not want to come back? I mean, this place, it looks like a prison camp, and it's run by the same people that they accuse of persecuting and killing them in the first place.
Even if the Rohingya did start to come back, they likely wouldn't get the legal recognition they seek, including citizenship. Myanmar's government actually considers them illegal immigrants from Bangladesh. With Myanmar refusing to acknowledge wrongdoing or the existence of the Rohingya ethnic group, the refugees' future remains uncertain. This is no man's land, a strip on the edge of Myanmar's border with Bangladesh. The 5,000 Rohingya living here would likely be the first to be returned, since they're within Myanmar's boundaries. They know that the government has said they can return, but they remain in limbo, unwilling to leave the country, but too fearful to go back to their villages.
Do any of you guys speak English?
Not safe for us.
You're afraid of the military?
Yeah.
Why?
Still not action against the perpetrator.
What kind of action?
So according to law, international law. So many people have been killed. Nobody want to live this bad condition.
It's been a year.
As difficult and as devastating as those images of concentration camps and the bones of slaughter and burnings were to witness, they are just some of the sharpest edges of projects of persecution and elimination and forced assimilation that are much longer, broader, and deeper. In the case of the Rohingya, for example, Myanmar has been executing projects of forced expulsion against them since 1978, and the project of persecution against the Beringia has involved not only these overt acts of violence, including rape, to drive the Rohingya out of their territory, but also the implementation of laws in order to strip them of their citizenship status, as was done in 1982, as well as to put them under programs of extreme program and repression. For example, the passing of racial and religious protection laws that limited Rohingya's ability to marry and to reproduce. And we know from other genocidal contexts that these are hallmark laws associated with genocidal projects. In the case of the Uyghurs, the concentration camps are just some of the nodes of vast projects of surveillance, subjugation, and control that have been implemented by the Chinese state against the Rohingya, so that the Uyghur homeland of East Turkestan, which the Chinese government calls the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, a name which is really a misnomer. It suggests that Uyghur autonomy is supposed to be recognized, but in fact, the Uyghurs' homeland is one of the most intense spaces of surveillance, not only in China, but in the entire world. So that even the most intimate spaces of Uyghur life have been infiltrated and placed under the eyes of the state. For example, state officials are placed inside Uyghur homes where Uyghur families are forced to let them eat their meals with them and live in their beds. Even Uyghurs' cells, their bodily cells, have been subjected to such infiltration with the mass collection of and databasing of Uyghur DNA by the Chinese government. With the launch of the global war on terror, the Myanmar and Chinese states took the opportunity to reframe these long-standing historical exercises of persecution and subjugation as fronts in the war on terror and as exercises of counterterrorism. Here is a chart prepared by Maung Zarni and Natalie Brinham. Maung Zarni is a Burmese activist who has been a great champion for the Rohingya, and Natalie Brinham is a British scholar of genocide. And this chart shows, I don't know if you can read the writing, but I can tell you what it says, shows the shifting pretexts that the Myanmar government has used in an attempt to rationalize its treatment of the Rohingya, from controlling illegal Rohingya immigration. As we heard in the video, the Myanmar government represents the Rohingya as illegal immigrants, even though they have been living in Rakhine State in Myanmar since the 15th century. But they say that they're illegal immigrants from Bangladesh. So the pretexts have shifted from controlling illegal immigration to gradually, after 9/11, to representing the Rohingya as a terrorist threat. And unfortunately, this is a narrative that has also been entrenched by the way that our Canadian and also American media have represented the current crisis as what they call a response to attacks by Rohingya quote-unquote terrorists on police posts, when in fact evidence by the UN as well as other independent human rights organizations like Fortify Rights have found that the preparations for the current operations, or the recent operations against the Rohingya, actually began before the alleged Rohingya attacks on the police post occurred. And moreover, they are merely a continuation of what we see are decades of efforts to expel the Rohingya from their homes and out of the country. So that one senior Myanmar military official called the recent operations a continuation of unfinished business, quite chillingly. The Chinese exploitation of war on terror rhetoric has been equally transparent, so that just days before 9/11, a senior Communist Party official said that Xinjiang is not a place of terror in an effort to court investment in the region. And then just days after 9/11, they're suddenly saying that Xinjiang has terrorists, pure and simple. And unfortunately, this rhetoric has proven persuasive not only within China, but to other governments. For example, the American government, at the urging of China, listed the East Turkestan Islamic movement, which is a supposed terror group that the Chinese government says exists by the Uyghurs. The US listed this as a terrorist organization, and I believe it's still listed as a terrorist organization, on the basis of Chinese documents that independent American scholars said were full of misinformation and biased reporting. The reality from independent American scholars, in fact, is that it remains unclear whether a militant Uyghur organization even exists that is capable of carrying out substantial and organized acts of terrorism, but in an effort to court Chinese support for various exploits in the war on terror, from the illegal invasion of Iraq to more recently support for the war on ISIS, America has unfortunately participated in the legitimization of China's narrative about the Uyghurs, so that as recently as 2014, President Barack Obama made a statement stating that East Turkestan should not be allowed to be a haven for Uyghur terrorists. So we know that the war on terror has been used by our governments here in Canada as well as in the US to pass laws and other types of measures that severely restrict our civil liberties and rights, but it's also important to remember that the war on terror has also been a powerful tool in the hands of authoritarian governments seeking to justify and rationalize and gain support for their projects of repression against Muslim minorities as well as other vulnerable minorities who have faced very long-standing repression and violence at the hands of their governments. One project contemporarily that's important to understand for the current exercises of persecution against both the Rohingya and the Uyghurs is China's Belt and Road Initiative, which is a massive development project by China envisioned as a modern-day Silk Road, which spans Asia, parts of Europe, parts of Africa. Rakhine State, which is the state where the Rohingya live in Myanmar, is one cornerstone of the Belt and Road Initiative. Particularly, there's a deep sea port project that China is investing in Rakhine State. And Xinjiang province, East Turkestan, the Uyghurs' homeland, is also an important geographical location for China's project because, as one of our panelists, Mehmet, has pointed out at previous events at Noir, Xinjiang provides China's only land border with 5 other countries that are important for its development and economic imperialist aspirations. So that's some of the context and deeper history behind the current projects of persecution that we're seeing now. I would like to invite our panelists to make their way up to the table. And as they're coming up, I will introduce them. Anwar Arkhani from the Rohingya community is a pillar of the Rohingya community in Canada and also a formidable activist and advocate for Rohingya rights. He's been instrumental in efforts to have the Canadian government recognize and take action on the Rohingya genocide. We are honored to have worked with him and featured him many times before at Noir, and so we're very happy that he's here with us again today. Mehmet Tohti is he's a prominent Uyghur activist here in Canada, and we are also honored that we have featured and worked with him previously at Noir. And Louisa Grief from the Uyghur Human Rights Project. We are so fortunate to have her here today. She's usually in the United States, and we've been admiring her work from afar, but she and Mehmet were just speaking today at a conference at University of Toronto on law in China. And so we are very happy to have all three of our panelists with us here today. So I'm going to start. By putting some questions to our panelists to draw out some of the connections, points of similarity, and actions that we can take from our panelists, and then we'll open it up to the floor for questions from you. So first, Mehmet, I want to ask you if you can talk a bit more about the ways that the Chinese government has specifically targeted expressions and practices of Islam in its treatment of the Uyghurs.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening. Special thanks for accommodating us and warm reception you're offering for us, and creating this kind of friendly environment to exchange ideas and share the pain and build up for future in our interactions. And also a special thanks for your article in Al Jazeera. I believe you wrote it, right? In Al Jazeera, recently published with the Aziza.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, thanks for that as well.
Also, what about the Uyghurs as an Ottawa citizen?
Okay. Oh, Ottawa, so I'm sorry. Yeah, I missed that. And so, when we talk about Islam among the Uyghurs, and we have to start from 9th century, that was the time we embraced Islam. And the first Muslim state, Karahanlılar state in Kashgar at that time, our first the Sultan who embraced Islam as a state religion is Sultan Suluk Borahan. And he's the first Turkic Sultan or ruler embraced Islam in 915. And since then, Kashgar became the main school for academic research and learning Islam. And probably most of the Muslims we know about Imam Bukhari. And Imam Bukhari, Bukhara, Kashgar, those places, Fargana Valley, became the most important cradle for Islamic scholarship. And at that time, the Khanlak Madrasa, the school was built in Kashgar, continued till 2010, when the Chinese government destroyed all the city of Kashgar completely. I was working at the European Union, representing the World Uyghur Congress there, and worked with the European members to introduce a resolution condemning Chinese destruction of the Kashgar old city, which is 2,000 years old. The cradle of Uyghur civilization completely destroyed. During that destruction, that Khanlak Madrasa also destroyed by the Chinese government. And so, after the Chinese invasion in 1949, Chinese government initially, they tend to be more nice for Uyghurs, helping them, sweeping their floors and carrying waters for them, just acted nicely, and just basically coming out with the deception that we are going to leave within 10 years after helping you this and that. And right after 1960s, the Cultural Revolution and the total isolation outside the world in the 1980s open up period, And during the Cultural Revolution, all mosques are destroyed, and there was no religious life, and the Quran was burned. I was young at that time. So since 1980s open up period, and the Uyghurs allowed certain degree of autonomy and start to build their mosques, until 2016 or 15, in whole East Turkestan there were 26,000 mosques. And today, I doubt if there are 10 mosques left, all of them destroyed. And Kashgar Idgah Mosque, built in 1491, 600 years ago. It is turned into museum, and if you go now, you buy a ticket, just get into the mosque as a tourist, just see it as a museum. No one is allowed to pray. It is covered by the barbed wires. And so, because of the sudden change of policy, with the extreme degree, not only mosques are destroyed, and praying clothes, mats, or Quran, or any religious content, books, even if there is God, just any words Allah or God on your cell phone, you are in concentration camp. And basically not only the mosques, church also destroyed, and the Bibles also confiscated. It is whole-scale attack on religion. So when we talk about today the Islam, people cannot go to mosque, not allowed, and the current campaign of Chinese government is basically forcing the Uyghurs to denounce their religious belief and ethnic affinity. The two pillars of Chinese government attacking, and also they are taking away the young kids to state-sponsored orphanage centers for brainwashing, and any elderly who used to pray, or even some fathers who told their son don't drink 10 years ago, today in the concentration camps. So today there is no any religious life left, and that religion became the main target of Chinese government. Even officially, Chinese government declared Islam is a mental illness, need to be cured.
Thank you, Mehmet. Anwar, in the context of the Rohingya, we've also seen very virulent racist and Islamophobic discourse by the Myanmar government. Can you talk a bit about some of that discourse underlying the practices of persecution?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First, I would like to thank the Noor Center for organizing this wonderful event. I feel kind of wordless, honestly, to hear the situation of Uyghurs community in China. And all of you saw the two video clips, one of Uyghurs community, the other is the Rohingya. And there were two main officials who were interviewed. One is a thin, skinny guy, the other one is kind of plumpy, fatty guy. They were just blatantly saying no, and that's it. Like 2 feet, 3 feet long questions, you know, if you write with a pen, and you just say no. So, I wonder how can anyone with logical mind can speak to a nonsense idiot like this. I'm sorry to you for the wrong, I mean, the bad word, but I don't know what else I should call him. The idiot. He just said no, and we don't have Rohingya. We are still alive. More than 1 million in Bangladesh. About 300,000 in Indonesia, in Malaysia, and a couple of thousands in Indonesia, many thousands in Thailand, Pakistan, India, Dubai or UAE, and Saudi Arabia, all of those countries, the Rohingyas, they just fled to anywhere they could, just to be alive. Really very simple. Why they fled? They want to be alive. Nobody wanted to be dead or killed or tortured. And they said, we don't have Rohingyas. Any history book, any school curriculum, any government documentations you open, there is the Rohingya. Race, Rohingya. Religion, Islam. They said, no, we don't have religion discrimination. All those villages were initially, when it started in 2012, the major construction, it shows in the video, it was destroyed with bulldozers. So general public, let's say, they say, oh, it's a communal riot. Both sides, these people are angry. So there is no two sides, just one side. The government encouraging their thugs to go and kill just one particular group of people and finish, and that's it. There is no two sides, just one side. And government, where, let's say if it is regular public, where I can get a bulldoze? It is in Burma, you cannot have a scanner, you cannot have a printer. Again, it is against the law, you will be punishable in the jail for many months or many years. There is no public at all anywhere who owns a bulldozer. No, they are saying no. And by the way, the first major village they destroyed is called Kaman village. Kamans are Shia. Kamans are Shia. So, and Burmese government is still saying that Kaman are our national, our citizen, but Rohingyas are not. We never had Rohingyas. The so-called Rohingyas came from Bangladesh. We never came from anywhere. We are son of the soil. Our ancestors, hundreds of years ago, 1,000 years, maybe 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, all Hindus. We're all Hindus.
What are you called Rohingya?
So, it was the name of those clans. It's not us. It's those Hindus. They call themselves Rohingyas. It was the name of a clan, a big clan. There was a different dynasty and kingdom. We have nothing to do with Burma. It was a separate kingdom. We got absolutely nothing to do with Burma.
We came from India.
No, we didn't come from anywhere. We're from that land.
Rohingya.
Yes. If you say we came from India, so where India came from?
No, I thought you said.
No. I'm just saying, I'm not actually saying that what you said is wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm saying we did not come from anywhere. We're son of the soil, and we have nothing to do with Burma. It's a separate country, completely separate country. No, what Burmese government have been doing to us, why, actually, not the what, why, is just because of our religion. As brother said, nothing else, absolutely nothing else. A lot of people say, no, this has nothing to do with the religion. There are so many other factors. Maybe there are so many other factors, but 90% or 90+% of the cause is religion, purely religion. If I denounce Islam today, I am free. I am free there. I can own anything. I can do anything. I can run any business. So everything is based on the religion. I think I should stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mehmet, in your comments you noted that Christian communities have also been subjected to persecution. We know that in both China and Myanmar that there are multiple groups who are experiencing extreme subjugation at the hands of the state. So I'm wondering if all of our panelists can talk a bit about some of the connections between the way that the Rohingya or the Uyghur are being treated and the treatment of other groups subjected to persecution. And Louisa, perhaps let's start with you, since I know you have done a lot of work on Tibet as well as on the Uyghurs.
Yes. Right now, in terms of the governance of China, just like Canada more writ large is starting to ask, what is the government of China like? Why does the Chinese government think it's okay to kidnap 2 Canadian citizens, retry a third, actually detain 13 Canadians without a public trial or without a bail, and openly admitting that this is in response to and as retaliation for Canada's rule of law, having arrested a Huawei executive? Well, the answer is, what kind of government does China have? One that is concentrating power in the hands of one person, and therefore religion is a threat. Authoritarian regime. The Communist Party has been in charge of China for 70 years. It has never liked religion, but there have been periods of relative freedom. When he was growing up in the 80s, people could rebuild mosques, and books were printed in Uyghur. Now, it's a crime you may not speak Uyghur in a school or in an office, and even at home. The libraries have been cleaned of the books, so we're having a return to a time that's like a communist revolutionary time. And so that is why all religions in China are subject to extreme repression. School children are being told, before you can go to school, do you belong to a religion? Does your mother pray at home? Does your father pray at home? Does your sister pray at home? And this is not in the East Turkestan for the Uyghurs. This is just in some provinces. And if you answer, basically children are being told to turn in their parents for illegally practicing religion. And in the case of the Uyghurs, of course, we believe that this is a dual ethnic and religious repression that involves locking up all males between the ages of about 18 to 45, and much more extreme treatment in prison. So I'm not going to compare to Burma, but that's one thing that brings together religious oppression across China, except with a special plan for eradication of the Uyghur people.
So our brother here asked about Buddhists, and we know that the official who has been responsible for implementing in large part the surveillance state in East Turkestan had previously been stationed in Tibet. So can you just talk a bit about some of those connections? Either, whichever.
So the party secretary of the Xinjiang Autonomous Uyghur Autonomous Region did serve a term in Tibet, and it's well known that he was praised by higher party leaders for having done a good job on what's called stability maintenance. This is a euphemism, and for having taken care of a big threat that the Chinese government faced, which was, you probably remember this, there were over 100 young Tibetans who self-immolated to protest the extreme repression, surveillance, and punishment of people, monks practicing, people standing up for their rights. So there have been a wave, what's the total number, 166? 181 immolations over the last 3 years. So Chen Qingguo was, this is his name, Mr. Chen, was considered to have done a good job in repressing the trouble in Xinjiang, and so then in Tibet, and then he was sent over to East Turkestan. So it is somebody who has a lot of blood on his hands.
Okay, and gentleman's question, how about the Buddhism? Actually, there is, when we say Buddhism in China, we have to separate Tibetan Buddhism and the Chinese cultural Buddhism, because Buddhism is part of China. And if you visit any part of China, you will see many Buddhist temples. Those Buddhist temples are not destroyed, still alive, and it is also tourist attractions. And therefore, I don't know any Buddhist temples destroyed in Tibet, but there was, under Chen Qingguo, there was heavy repression against their religious belief. And 3-4 years ago, somehow they little bit eased up the pressure on Tibetans. Even they carried a photo of Dalai Lama. Before it was the biggest crime, and they could be able to do that. And some temples, they could hang the portraits of the Dalai Lama. Some, yes, a certain degree. And just for the case of Uyghurs in East Turkestan, it's complete ban. For the Uyghurs in East Turkestan, the religion is completely banned. And for Tibetans, they have a certain degree of practice. And at least I don't know that Tibetans in Tibet, the Buddhist temples are destroyed. I haven't heard that, but I don't know, maybe I missed it. But throughout China, the Buddhist temples are everywhere, and Shaolin, Shi, their special name, it's the part of the Chinese culture, because Chinese culture is also part of the Buddhist culture.
I'm sorry, we will have time for questions from the floor later, so right now we'll keep it to the comments from the panelists, and then we'll open it up.
There's one other point of comparison, and then maybe my friend would like to say something. What happens when governments try to use the UN human rights mechanisms to criticize governments which are violating international law, violating the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which every nation that belongs to the UN is a signatory to? By definition, if you belong to the UN, you have signed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was written in, I would love to know who can give me the year that the Universal Declaration of, yes, when was it written?
1948.
Yes. It was
Congratulations, you win some cake.
Yeah. So 1948, so that's 61 years ago. So why was it written then? It was written at the time of the founding of the UN. So writing this Universal Declaration of Human Rights and founding the UN was a reaction to the atrocities of the 1930s to say the conscience of the world, as my friend Mehmet said, was so shocked by what the Nazi Party was able to do with war throughout Europe, enslaving people, war camps, and a genocide of many, especially a third of Jews in the world. What should we do? So they wrote the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. If you read it, much of it makes sense as a reaction to that extreme moment in history. So every country belongs. What happens when the atrocities against the Rohingya are raised in the UN? Who leads the votes to protect the government of Burma and their generals? You know who leads in protecting governments from being criticized for human rights. I think our audience knows this.
U.S.
China. So China is siding with the generals in Burma who are being shielded from international criticism under international law. So that's one connection between these tragic stories.
Anwar, can you talk a bit about the connections between the violence that the Rohingya are experiencing and the violence experienced by other minority groups who are also being oppressed by the state and engaging in resistance to the central government?
Yes, there is a clear-cut line drawn among the operations of various communities and the Rohingyas. In Burma, every major minority, we have 7 or 8 considered major clan in Burma. Every clan has armed groups fighting against the government. Not now, since we got independence from British colonial government. And everybody is fighting but in many sense, if anybody really logically think and come up with a conclusion, Rohingya is the only armless, gunless, non-fighting major clan in Burma. So in a sense, it is proven that Rohingya is the only clan exists within Burma peacefully, non-violence, where we have not been fighting against the government. We had insurgents fighting for our rights, equal rights, and at some point government agreed, okay, no problem, you guys are our guys, so what's the issue? These are the issues. Okay, we can accept some, we cannot accept some, and then they agreed and it's gone. It was around 60s, everything was gone. There was no Rohingya group fighting against the government, demanding all the rights that were deprived of. But now, government come up with different tactics, different techniques, excuses, made up stories, plan here, plan there, and then say, hey, this is these people, Bengali, and they stopped calling us Rohingyas since late 70s, actually early 70s, and they use different words when they see fit, they see suits. Sometimes they call us Burmese Muslim, sometimes they call us Rakhine Muslim, sometimes they call us Muslim in Rakhine state. And at some point, one Burmese was asking me, what happened if we call you Burmese Muslim? I said, why don't you call yourself, first start with yourself. Why don't you call yourself Burmese Buddhist? Why you call Burman? You are not Burmese. Are you not Burmese Buddhist? if you call yourself, start with yourself. If you call yourself Burmese Buddhist, and I don't have a problem, you can call me Burmese Muslim. I don't have a problem. You abandon your name first, your clan name, then you can call me. Anyhow, so they create. If there is an issue, they make it bigger. If there is no issue, they find one, create one. For example, you saw they said a clearance operation. The so-called non-existent Rohingya Salvation Army, they call ARSA, ARSA, Arkan Rohingya Salvation Army, they created one. And then they attacked 30 outposts. Nobody died, and nobody knows who attacked, how, where. And that's why we need to clean. So they cleaned the entire population. Only about 10% left now. About 10 to 15% left inside the country. 85% either they killed, burned alive, or pushed out to Bangladesh. How about now? AA, maybe you have seen a lot of news. Arkan Army. Arkan Army has been fighting with the Burmese government for the last 2 months. Big, big fight. A lot of gunshots, like hundreds of shots every single day. So why there is no clearance operation against the Rakhine, who is another big group in my state? Why there is no clearance operation? Why there is until now, there is not a single Rakhine house was burned down. I am not pro burning houses. I'm just saying. Why there is no single rape of Rakhine women where you rape nearly 80,000 Rohingya women and pregnant women? They are giving birth of rape babies in the camp. You don't need any evidence. Those are DNAs. You just test it and you know. Why there is no single killing, burning, raping of Rakhine where they have been fighting for the last 2 months? And by the way, all those fights occurs around the remaining Rohingya villages, nowhere else. All of a sudden, there's the Arkan Army and Burmese Army. Fight broke. 3 Muslims died, or 3 boys, 3 young Muslims died in the skirmishes. There are collateral damage. 5 houses burned down. Whose houses? Muslim houses. What happened? Arkan Army and Burmese Army, they are fighting. So why all these fighting, creating? What sort of tactics you are doing these things? And in 2009, I was invited to talk at Geneva because I was helping some boat people, and in one a very closed door sort of talk with a lot of diplomats, and there was a Chinese guy, and he said, "Well, we should not discuss this so-called Rohingya issue. We don't know whether they exist." I said, "I'm here. Do you want to hear my voice?" "Yes, you are a diplomat. I'm not, but I'm a human. I exist. Do you want to say anything? Do you want my name? Do you want to know my name?" So that's how the Chinese are, honestly, against all the Muslims, not only Rohingyas, all the Muslims in Burma. Also, your article, the one here, I think this is the screenshot of your article that you wrote, or maybe no, the one that you wrote
about the Rohingya.
About the Rohingya and Chinese connection. And the major seaport they're building is the hardcore town of the Muslim, the Rohingyas in Chokyu, deep seaport. And Chinese give the orders, they clean them. I will block you, I will help you, I will do anything, I will protect you. And you will get 100% impunity at UN. So that's what it is.
Actually, that was the song I was...
Oh, please use the microphone because we're taping. And yes, please clap.
Today I was about to talk about that seaport, just I put the name here. The 85% ownership belong to the Chinese government of that seaport. And the Chinese government, the parallel line here, we need to note that the large scale or an extreme degree of persecution, expulsion, and the rape and the genocidal policy of Burmese government towards the Rohingya people, the start is around 2015 and 2016. It was a big point. That is the similar year to start the persecution of Uyghurs as well. Just because 2014 Chinese government announced so-called 2 21st century Marshall Plan, or known as Belt and Road Initiative. And so because now Chinese government got some problem in South China Sea, they tried to build some artificial islands to just to expand their control. And because the Malacca Strait is heavily controlled by US Marine, so Chinese government did not feel safe for their commercial or trade activities. So they wanted to have sea access to Indian Ocean by bypassing those Malacca South China Sea tension. So one port the Chinese government built just in the heart of Muslims, Rohingya Muslims live, where they live. And the second one is from Kashgar, from my hometown, to Gwadar port in Pakistan. That's the reason Uyghurs and the Rohingyas suffering. Just actor is the same Chinese, consequence is the same, purpose is the same, and many people did not realize. And behind the scene, it is China just playing. It is China emboldening the Myanmar authorities, their policy of genocidal policy against Rohingyas. So this parallel shouldn't be forgotten.
So I just wanted to add one more thing. Actually, the plan was drawn many years ago, and the Rakhine, in my state, they were blocking. They said, no, you cannot do this. Entire country was a kind of very upset. And government said, why don't you start killing these people and then divert their attention, and then you'll be able to do that. And how they started, the mass killing started in 2012. When it's a big town, this very major town actually. When they called fire truck came with petroleum in it to spray petroleum in a set of water. That's how the Tokyo town was, entire town was burned down. Only the Muslim section, major section of the town. And the other point I would like to add is now China is very big pro repatriation. China said, we will help you. Now, a lot of cameras, what do you call this, face recognition cameras, for security reason, China is providing. And China already provided a lot of containers. The iron containers, maybe you saw some of them in the video, with iron bar, barbed wire. And those iron containers, there is only one window, and that's it. All those returnees will go inside there and will never come back, even if they die there. So that's the plan of China, now pushing every country, especially Bangladesh, and then say, hey, you have to push these people. You know, there's a big issue going to happen because the world started going to recognize, call this as genocide, and things go messy, and push them back quickly. That's what China is doing right now.
Louisa, perhaps you could tell us a bit about some of the corporations involved in producing the kind of facial recognition technology Anwar mentioned that's being deployed against the Rohingya as well as against the Uyghurs. You were recently involved in producing a report on Huawei, a company that we've been having a little bit of discussion about in Canada recently. So can you talk about those corporations as well as Huawei in particular?
Yes, is my PowerPoint here? Because we can. It's about slide 61 in that. Could we flip forward to it? Is my PowerPoint preloaded? No. So often when we're speaking about what's happening to the Rohingya, we call, maybe the Rohingya too, maybe to the Uyghurs, is sometimes we call the Uyghur homeland a laboratory for repression, and it's not just a metaphor, it literally means the development of a so-called safe city system. It's also called intelligence security system. And so Chinese companies it's a worldwide trend to harness artificial intelligence, to harness data for safer driving. If we can have driverless cars, we need to have sensors along the road. We need to have cars be aware of where other cars are. We already have in our phones a lot of convenient apps that tells us you're near, I was going to say 7-Eleven, but I'm in Canada, you say I'm near a Tim.
Hey, we have 7-Elevens too.
Okay. So we have a lot of convenience of modern life based on something that's only this far from total surveillance, and if it's in the hands of a totalitarian regime, collate the data, and it's called the social credit system in China. People have, so why is the Uyghur homeland, the Uyghur region, so important? Civil liberties are not respected. You can force people to download an app on their phone to record everything on it, so that they will never have the word Allah or God on it, but you can also find out other things about their habits. Put that together with facial recognition cameras. We've had reports of people who've left who've been forced to give voice prints. And this is for a lab for the companies that are pouring in high-tech investment to the region to be able to take advantage of this large-scale data so they can develop artificial intelligence protocols. Of course, that research is being done in other parts of China as well, but the size of the database among the Uyghurs is large, partly because it also incorporates biometric data, forced sampling of DNA and blood samples from 100% of Uyghurs. I think that sounds very extreme, but we've got the data. So that becomes a laboratory for research. Money is being poured in by Chinese corporations, but there are also some investments by companies from outside China, getting particularly one called Thermo Fisher, which, does anybody work in the medical field? They're very well known globally for medical testing. They sold DNA sequencing machinery to the government, the Xinjiang government, the government of the region, and have come under huge fire for that. And then there are other Chinese companies that have international investment. Huawei has signed a major multi-year agreement with the government of Xinjiang to develop an intelligent city. Hikvision and Dahua are major makers. Hikvision is supposedly the largest maker of surveillance cameras in the world. And it would be very interesting for the Noir Center to look and find out what brand are your own security cameras, which are installed for good purposes. You can buy them on Amazon. These companies have more than $1 billion of contracts for the government of the Uyghur region. So the strange thing is, there are companies that are profiting from the surveillance. And the final thing is that many people, if you have a retirement fund or any labor union has a pension fund, and if some of that money is invested in the stock market, and some of their funds are in emerging markets, they probably own stock in these companies. So this is the globalized connection really means that it's not far from us to this remote region. Is that your question?
Oh, yes, perfect. Thank you. Anwar, as you noted, the treatment of the Rohingya is increasingly being recognized as a genocide, including in a celebrated decision by Canada's Parliament to recognize what is being done to the Rohingya as a genocide, and they stripped Aung San Suu Kyi of her honorary citizenship. But I'm wondering if you can talk about whether materially, politically, economically, much has changed in terms of Canada's approach to Myanmar, and what we should be asking our government to do that they're not doing.
I'm not a diplomat, so I will probably say things directly. I don't know whether...
You might have been able to tell from when you called that guy an idiot that he doesn't always use diplomatic language.
So, I don't know it will have a reverse impact, but unfortunately, no. Yes, we are grateful that Canadian government is the first government officially recognized the atrocity as genocide. Also, Canada is the first country which assigned a special envoy to investigate the issue and so on. But has Canada done anything close to good enough? No. No. It should be a blanket. What do you call this? Ban, economic sanction. There was one guy, there was a, what do you call this, ban on one guy, and then a reporter called me, and said, Anwar, what do you think about this? And I told the reporter, do you think I'm drunk? I don't drink, I never drank in my life, alcoholic thing. So I'm not a drunk. Sanction against one person? Are you kidding me? I don't know, should I laugh or should I cry? And then later, The government added 2, 3, 4 more people.
They've added, so there's 7 people.
Yeah, 7 people. I was not
that
interested, so I don't know the exact figure anymore. So that is actually nothing. It has to be a blanket. Maybe except food and medicine. A blanket worldwide ban or sanction. And people always think, right away when I say that, oh, how about the regular public? Regular public do not benefit anything. Absolutely nothing from the government. My government, I know I was born and raised there. My parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and generation going, I don't know how many generations. We were born there, I know what that government does. There is absolutely no social welfare system in our country. So why you think about this general public? General public has nothing to do with the economic sanction. They are not benefiting anything. Everything goes to the pocket of the general, and generals are the one who will be crippled with this sanction. So I wish, or I think we should raise a voice to the government that, hey, you have to do these things, and this is next on your plate.
Mehmet, I know you've also been engaged in a great deal of advocacy with the Canadian government on behalf of the Uyghurs. Can you talk a bit about what Canada's position has been and what we should be pressing our government to do, including in the case of Hussein Jalil, a Canadian who's still imprisoned in China and yet hasn't been receiving the attention that the Canadians recently imprisoned by China have been?
This is, at the end, we share our pain. At the end, there should be some real action to change the situation. Without real action being taken, and if we talk all day long, the people are still suffering. It's the matter for people, death and lives. So real action is important. And a number of things in our agenda. The number one, the Canada, I was told before by the government officials that the form Five Eyes countries, with the participation of US, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, 5 English-speaking countries, together information gathering and information sharing, and also figure out the right policy to act together. And we need to push government to continue, not only talk to talk, just take some action as well. And the 5 countries can change a great deal of Chinese behavior, and so it is important. And now as a community, the most important thing is, and now some of the steps Canada, before taking those steps, Canada is closely watching what will be happening to the United States, especially for Magnitsky Act, and currently there is Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act on the Congress in the discussion. So Canada is pretty much following what will happen in the US before taking some concrete action. This is number 2. And if something happens in the United States, then we have much more stronger ways to push our government to take the similar path. And most importantly, I think we discussed before, this November, 2 months ago, we sent 2 our community members to Turkey to interview the stateless Uyghurs. And our 2 members stayed in Istanbul, Turkey just for 10 days, and more than 11,000 people registered. Out of that number, 5,000–6,000 are children, stateless, because Chinese government's deliberate refusal of passport extension or passport renewal, especially for newborns. If Turkey and some Uyghurs in Egypt and Saudi Arabia, those countries, they don't have birthright citizenship. Neither they offer citizenship for newborns, nor Chinese governments. So those Uyghur babies born in those countries became automatically stateless, and they were vulnerable for Chinese pressure for deportation because they are living illegally. They cannot get anything, they cannot open a bank account, they cannot go to school or nothing. And so we registered the most vulnerable, and in this regard we need the help from all communities just to press our government, except some of those Uyghur refugees, let's give them a life, because They are really stateless. They don't have valid passports. And Turkey also under pressure of China, especially Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu last year, August 4th, when meeting with his Chinese counterparts Wang Yi, he said, Chinese security is our security. We don't allow anything that harms Chinese interest or any activities harms China, and we don't allow any negative media news in Turkish media. So since then, there's nothing about concentration camps in Turkish media. It is controlled by government. So there is some kind of public protest in Turkey, but government level nothing. So at least in Canada, we can, as a community, come together, push our government to help those, at least 2,000 Uyghur families, just to bring them with the children, give them a hope and a life here in Canada.
And I know some of our Uyghur sisters here are selling fabrics to raise money for some of the stateless Uyghurs who are in Turkey right now. Louisa, would you like to say something before we turn it over to Q&A from the floor about what's happening in the United States? You know, Mehmet said that if the US does something that would give Canadians a stronger leg to stand on.
So if you have friends who are US citizens, please ask them to write or call their member of Congress and ask the Congress to act as soon as possible on the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act. So you don't have to debate, is it cultural cleansing, is it an incipient genocide? It's just about human rights. It's a very easy act, and it has powerful sponsors, very bipartisan. So on the Republican side, Marco Rubio is a very prominent Republican with the president's party. But on the Democratic side, it's Bob Menendez, extremely long-serving, very well-respected Democratic senator. And in this House, it's the very same thing. It's co-sponsored by an equal number of Democrats and Republicans. So we could even use some Canadians' help to ask all your friends in America to say, call up your member of Congress and ask them to move quickly on the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act. And once that's passed, we really will be able to go to not only here in Canada, but also Australia will be able to do something. London is ready to act. And we know that even in Germany and Australia and even the EU has a global act. So this should be the chain reaction. I really think people, by making that phone call, your friends who are US citizens or who just live in the US, actually you don't have to be a citizen to call your member of Congress. You just have to live somewhere in America. I think it will start a chain reaction. You can make a difference.
So as bleak and as devastating as these situations are, there is still reason for us to hope that we can take at least some actions that can make a difference. Now, I know I saw some hands going up from the floor, so we'll turn over questions from the floor, and we will start with Nyla. And I'll just repeat your questions because we are filming, and so we need it to be microphoned. So Nyla, please ask your question.
Okay, so thank you very much for sharing the information, and it's really sad to hear the situation. I was hoping that one of you would talk about the role. We've spoken a lot about China, but in terms of Aung San Suu Kyi's
role, yes.
You know how she got the Nobel Prize and how Hillary Clinton was, doing that, and the kind of nobody's actually said anything about her or to her. There's been very subtle kind of. So I was hoping you would be talking about her. I mean, you've been very vocal about China. What about her?
So the question is, can you talk a bit about the role that Aung San Suu Kyi has played with respect to the Rohingya?
To me, personally, she is not an idol. She is not an honest woman. But for some reason, for various reasons, the Western countries made her look like a heroine. They just supported anything and everything. If there is nothing to support, they just create an occasion to support her. That's what the reality is. And when the generals, armies, killing people, ripping up the country's resources, all these things, oh, militaries are bad, Burma is bad, military bad, this bad, that bad, everything was bad. When Aung San Suu Kyi came to power, she did 60 times, 70 times worse crime or more crime than in her, prior to her government, the military government did. But for Western countries, no, we should give her a chance. We need to see. She is the only step for us. She is the only step to the door. If we alienate her, we will never be in Burma. So why you need to go to Burma? When in Burmese history, last election was the first election that no Rohingya or no Muslim were able to run in the election.
And the Rohingya weren't even allowed to vote.
No.
Right?
Rohingya in every election, doesn't matter how repressed we were, there were, in every parliament, there were Muslim MPs, again, Rohingya MPs, and sometimes even ministers. In this election, when she became the de facto leader, not only the Rohingyas and the Muslims were not allowed to run for the election, we are also banned, officially banned from voting. And she is the one successfully completed the purging of the entire nation of Rohingya, which the army government have been trying since 1960. I don't see any nobility. Nobel Prize is a joke for me, honestly. What did you look into it? Unless you have some self-interest, vested interest, I don't know what it is, that you wanted to make her look like an angel and the best of the best, and then give these things to her. Other than that, I don't see anything. She's a rotten and worse than anybody else.
Any other questions from the floor? Yes, Ilham.
Well, I'm a psychiatrist. I see a lot of anger up here. So I hear a lot of anger. However, for me it is not useful because I want to also understand the background. I think you, unfortunately, didn't define the problem, people, and so on, so that I can put it in perspective. So I still don't know. When did, first of all, Rohingya people, I understand they're clans, they existed there very special. At what time, and they've been Muslims since 9th century, but when did they become Muslims?
The question is, when did the Rohingya become Muslims?
As far as I know, it is in 7th century.
7th century?
7th century.
7th century.
Yes.
Before the Turkish.
Yes. And also I would like to add one more thing, that the anger thing, I am not a very highly scholar, but I would like to say one thing. If I am not angry to what is happening to my community, I should not be alive, I should be dead man. Honestly. Or also, the word anger should not exist. The government, current government killed my father, let alone anybody else. Then I had to run to refugee camps when I was a 4th grader. Then I had to run again second time to be alive and never went back. So this time I came out of Burma since 1984 and never went back. And now most of my relatives, all dead, were killed. Not just, they just died. They were killed, burned alive. I have 3 surviving sisters in the camp. One will be dying maybe in a week or so. Last night I was talking to her, my eldest sister. So if I am not mad or angry, those words should not be in the dictionary or in the human conversation, really. Those words should not exist. Thank you, I'm not angry with you.
Did you have more to your question, or it was just about who the...
you didn't tell us when did they become Muslim,
7th century.
Become a problem. Is that an ideology of some communist, whatever they were in?
There is power and greed.
Yes, I was.
So, wait, can you please use the microphone when you answer? And the question was, when did they become Muslim? When did they become a problem for the government? For reference, from the perspective of international law, all that matters is that the Rohingya were present in Rakhine State and living in Rakhine State at the time that Burma or Myanmar became recognized as a state in international law. And they were definitely there at that point, which makes all of the Burmese or Myanmar's government's actions against them to de facto rob them of citizenship and everything, makes it all entirely illegal. So from that perspective, when they became Muslim and everything is, or when they came is irrelevant. But maybe Anwar has more to add?
No, I was just answering the question. I was talking something relevant to the question that I was asked. Because of the time constraint, it will be too long actually. The earliest history, recorded history, the Hindus or non-religion people converted to Islam in my state called Arakan Kingdom in 7th centuries. So extensively written on the Rohingyas, it was around 15th, 14th century. And now what is happening, there was no issue between Muslims who are converted from Hindus and the non-religion. There was no issue. Only Burman who are Tibetan, we call Tibetan Burman, or not Aryan, and then those race came to this kingdom and they said, oh, this is a good place, I should stay here instead. And then they were thinking differently, and then they wanted to get the entire thing. They had a weird mind. They spoiled the Buddhists in my country, and they said, okay, kick out these people. We were brothers, you're Buddhist, I'm Buddhist, let's take it. So that's how it was colonized by Burma before British colonized us. Then British went from India, colonized the Arakan part, not the entire Burma. Then later they went and then colonized the rest of Burma. When we got independence, the Burmese said, well, Arakan was part of Burma. It was not a separate kingdom at that time. So if you give independence, it should be within the territory of Burma. And then we were just there, helpless. It is the British, all the messed up things, and before that there was a smaller mess, but bigger mess was created by the British.
Well, I think a lot of people here can sympathize with British colonialists messing things up for people. We have a question from Barbara Hall, who, for those of you who don't know her, was our former Chief Commissioner of the Ontario Human Rights Commission. We're delighted to have her.
And our mayor.
And our mayor, yes. So please.
I wonder if you could comment on the impact of the current relationship between Canada and China, and how you think that affects or doesn't affect the ability of the Canadian government to effectively intervene.
Just so make sure everyone can hear, the question is about Canada's, the nature of Canada's current relationship with China, and how that affects or doesn't affect Canada's ability to exert an influence.
Honestly, Canada has a lot of reason to be upset right now, just for being deceived so long by China and so much. I remember year 2000, I was invited by Liberal Convention, Liberal International Convention. At that time, Prime Minister in Canada was John Chrétien. I had a chance very briefly to talk about. At that time, I was very active. I was not this much active, but tried to explain the situation of Uyghur human rights and others. And I remember each and every time when I talked about Canada, especially the Canadian International Development Agency. It is called CEDA. Probably you are aware of that. And when Canada starts to send $1 billion each year to China, on the name of building bridges and training judges and improving prison facilities, this and that. And the China Human Rights Coalition, I was there, Tibetans, Amnesty International, and some other human rights organizations. They pressed Canada, this is not right. The China is already rich, and secondly, China is not going to use this fund provided by Canada to improve jail or prisons. Instead, they are going to use this fund to expand more prison facilities. And it turned out to be so. And in many cases, especially when Hussein Jalil was arrested in 2006, I met with Stephen Harper 3-4 times, and I tried to give why China is so crazy, just arresting one Canadian, not only a Canadian, refusing his citizenship. China did not recognize the Canadian citizenship of Hussein Jalil. And citizenship is part of sovereignty of one state. Canada should stand firm at that time. Instead, Stephen Harper said, we don't change our values with almighty dollars, this and that, but empty talk without result. And Canada's trade lobby with China, they had a great impact to shape Canada's China policy. More trade, and more trade and the development in China helps Chinese political system to open up. That was the perception, not only Canada, United States and European countries also believe in. Now they said, okay, we are badly wrong. China became more rich, but more totalitarian. And China became more powerful, and now they are ignoring us. They are setting their own rules. So, anyway, we invest with our dollars, tax dollars, or our shopping habits. We create a giant monster called People's Republic of China. And now, that government is blocking every system that Western society built since Second World War. And China said, what I say will be the new order, new rule. You have to obey, or you have to abide by. So it is a difficult position for Canada, and now I don't think Canada alone can change anything. But if Canada works with the other Western governments, because just imagine the Chinese foreign reserves, or US dollars or euros, whatever it is, 65 to 70% of that money that China is using to show its strength, that money is coming from Western markets, from Canada, US, Europe, because we have higher purchasing power. So if those countries come together, we can change it. Otherwise, it is really difficult. But at least, just sometimes it is better for government to listen to human rights organization, just rule of law, human rights, and those things is not a joke, and we have to take it seriously, and we have to push the government of China to respect that. And sometimes some Western governments set aside the human rights issue just for trade. Now China is not listening to anything. We lost our leverage.
So I know Barbara Landau here has a question, and Pervez. Uncle, can anyone else who has a question please raise their hand so we can gauge how many there are? Just you two. Okay, so maybe we'll just get both questions together, and then we'll get all of the panelists to answer and make any final remarks that they would like to make. So Barbara, please.
I just want to thank you for the wonderful presentation tonight. There is so much injustice in the world and so much to do, and I really appreciate the time you've taken. What I would like to walk out the door with as a summary, and I really am building on what Barbara Hall has just said, is this is a really complex situation. And there are many things that we're not able to do even though we witness the injustice. What I'd like to walk out the door with is what can we do? What are the concrete things? Things like writing for support of a particular bill in Congress, you know, that, or in the Canadian government. I would like just a short shopping list of what we as not very powerful citizens can actually do.
Okay, and Pervez, last question.
My question was sort of similar to as we asked, but in addition to that, we had a similar meeting over here a few weeks ago in which there was a gentleman from Uyghurs, and he was talking about a kind of separation. There was a movement within the Uyghurs. They wanted to separate from China. They had a flag similar to that of Turkey. My Turkish flag is red. The Uyghurs flag is blue. And what I wanted to note is that just like the Turks would not want the Kurds to take a chunk of Turkey and separate, maybe is it that? Maybe that is the reason why China is concerned that Uyghurs might want to separate from them.
So final two questions. One about concrete actions that we can take in Canada to support the Uyghur and Rohingya communities, and then Chinese fears about Uyghur separatism and how that's informing the current situation. So we'll just go down and I'll ask all the panelists to answer the questions and make any closing remarks.
Okay, for first question, what we can do is still we can call our MPs just to use the tools, available tools, just like a Magnitsky Act. And there are Chinese government mistreating Canadians, at least we can name them. And we can add those names on the sanction list just to use the Magnitsky Act to sanction some of the Chinese officials involved in this mafia process, persecuting Canadian citizens. At the same time, we have... Do
you have a list at maybe the Uyghur Human Rights Project or elsewhere of particular Chinese officials who could be targeted for sanctions?
Yeah, the government of Canada knows which the Communist Party officials involved in the decision-making process to arrest those Canadian citizens, and also which government officials are involved to order them to build those concentration camps. And it is not just, there are certain hierarchy in China available, and if that information is not available in our government and the CSS, they should resign. Otherwise we can provide, it's not a big deal. And just I'm giving some the concrete steps. Still we can call our MPs, just use the Magnitsky bill already approved by our House. It is the tool, just to sanction those who are violating our rights. We can use that. We can ask our MPs to use that tool. For Uyghur issue, Rohingya issue, or overall Chinese officials who are detaining the Canadian citizens. This is number one. And the second, for your question, separatism, this and that. Okay, it is the right of people to determine their own political future. If 18 million Uyghurs, and half of them in the concentration camp, children are taken away, their religious belief, ethnic and national identity under attack of the state, systematically, deliberately. And if the state's main function now became to so-called normalize all Uyghurs in Chinese way, create a Chinese way of Islam, create an Islam that fits the atheist Chinese ideology, then as people with a dignity, they should have their right to determine their own political future. It is the right. Self-determination is the right of the people. It is the legal right. And secondly, the Uyghurs are not separating some Chinese cities from China. Uyghurs, if that would be the case, Uyghurs are living in their own ancestral land, just like others, as a free and the people with dignity. So it should not be your concern. And it should be up to those people to make their own decision who are suffering under Chinese rule. So if state does not respect you, if Chinese constitution is not applicable for Uyghurs, if Chinese criminal code is not applicable for Uyghurs, And the shiny words in Chinese constitution to respect the religious freedom, this and that, is not applicable for entire one ethnic group. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
Okay, I'll let you follow up. Yes.
Are the Chinese, how are they dealing with the Tibet situation?
Tibet separation?
Can you say it one more time?
How the Chinese are handling this Tibet situation? If Tibet wants to separate from China, how are the Chinese dealing with that?
It is up to Tibetans, as I said. The same rule applies. Not only Tibetans, now Hong Kong people also. Just I came from the conference today. There was the representative from Hong Kong people, and he said there are a strong movement in Hong Kong to determine their own political future, self-determination. It is the same thing for Taiwan as well. Even there is one party built to make Shanghai, that's the biggest city, the independent state. So you cannot stop this. It is firstly it is blame for Chinese Communist Party, the government, because government did not treat their citizens well. Chinese government continued to be the highest placed state for entire population. So if China, the main function of the state is offer justice and peace and security. Chinese government offer that function of the state just for the members of the Chinese Communist Party, not overall population. In that case, there's a lot of resentments, there are a lot of police brutality of ordinary Han Chinese as well, and there are more than half of the Chinese population living in very poor conditions still. And you see the shiny cities and the coastal cities and some other rich Chinese people. But those rich Chinese people, they have strong ties with the Communist Party. And ordinary Chinese people, if you visit some of the Chinese cities, they live in caves, and some rural areas, there's some, I read the story a couple months ago, a number of Chinese, the families, they sold their girls to the big bosses in the coastal city. So people are desperate, and it is not easy. Plus, there is everywhere Chinese police and security brutality. And so, if the government is not capable to provide satisfaction or fair amount of justice for all citizens, just mobilize a whole country to serve 65 million Communist Party members of China, then the people will come up with different solutions. Not only Uyghurs and the Tibetans, some other Chinese people as well. It is the common trend right now.
So for people who would like to walk away here from doing something, I have a handout, but because our conference at University of Toronto went so long, I couldn't bring it. So I'd like to read out a website for you.
And we can send it out on our listserv.
Okay, great. So if you'd like to look it up tonight while you're thinking about it, it's uhrp.org, so the Uyghur Human Rights Project. Oh, that is that email address. So in the flyer you have, that's right, it's on the, these beautiful, by the way, we want to say thank you to our sister who made these beautiful flowers. Do you see the sayings on the side of the flower pot? They all relate to our theme today. And the brochure has our website. If you go to our website, on the right-hand side, there's something called What You Can Do. So if you go to our website, look on the right-hand side, it says What You Can Do. It has a list of actions. And it's exactly like this. Just write to your MP, in this case of Canadians. You don't have to give a name. Simply say, I'd like to ask you to ask the government to take action by sanctioning those responsible for major human rights abuses. We also think that the Red Cross needs to get involved. We haven't been able to talk about it at all, but in the case of the Uyghurs, and maybe there's some action, I actually think that if we can get 25 Canadians and 40 or 50 Americans, and maybe a couple of campuses, and suddenly in Geneva, the Red Cross office starts getting literally handwritten letters, and people remember how to put a stamp on a letter. They don't give out their email address. And a lot of people are saying, what happened to all those Uyghur children? We have somebody here who called, she says, I'm from a double detainee family. Do you know what a double detainee family is? This is new vocabulary in the vocabulary of repression. It means not only the mother or father is taken away to the secret detention camps, it's also the other parent. So the children are either left home with the grandparents, and many cities have a regulation. If it's a double detainee family, by law, those children must go to a state orphanage where they will never again hear a word of Uyghur. Certainly never, they'll miss their parents, they'll be orphaned by the state, and they will certainly not be cared for by anybody who cares about their identity, and they'll be taught how bad the Uyghurs are as an affirmative teaching tool, not just, we're going to fool you into thinking you're a Chinese person, which is, a wonderful culture. We're going to have you repeat a lot of rhetoric about how bad the Uyghurs are. So I think the Red Cross needs to be alerted that if they don't have a mandate now, but they need to be prepared. I'm very hopeful that the camps will be closed and that we will need the UN to reunite families. So those are the first 2 items you'll find on that list, and there are 5 others after that. So I hope you will go ahead and take action like that. Thank you.
And I know others have compared what's being done to the Uyghur children to the residential schools that were inflicted on Indigenous people in Canada, and we know how shameful that is regarded, looking at it with hindsight, with our eyes now, and yet the same type of situation is being permitted to unfold in Xinjiang, and also against Indigenous children currently who are disproportionately taken from their families. But Anwar, final comments, please.
It was really overwhelming, truly, and I appreciate Muhammad. He has already said what I was supposed to say. So since the case is slightly different, I would like to add a few more words there. First, I asked myself, a lot of people ask me, what can I do? And the question quickly come to my mind, do I have the right to exist? That is the thing I asked. Do I have the right to exist on this planet? Burmese government is saying, I'm not from there. Chinese government is saying, we don't even know whether they exist. Now we're pushed out the remaining Rohingya, how many ever Burmese government got hold of, killed, mutilated, buried alive, burned alive. Whoever managed to go, flee, they are in Bangladesh, more than 1 million. Do we have the right to exist? Now, UN, Canadian government officially, recently US, have said clearly that this is genocide. Now, where is the action? Should the powerful countries in this world, who always say never again, referring to Holocaust and genocide, and it is happening again and again, when there is going to be intervention? If you really study the past genocide or current ongoing genocide, no country, no genocider ever stopped without being bound to the ground. Really, completely, you have to go and destroy that country. So only then they say, yeah, okay, never mind, this is yours, and this you take it, and yeah, take it. Other than that, there is no solution. I'm not, in a sense, I'm saying that yes, somebody needs to go and bomb hell out of Burma. That's what it is. Until then, Burmese government will not stop. China said, hey, you don't need to stop. I'm beside you. I am the elephant in the room. Who can do anything to you? Nothing. Nobody can raise a finger. I'm there. Now providing containers, so pushing Bangladeshi government, these people will go into the container and they will come back. So now there is something called R2P. Can we invoke R2P? I think it is time.
Responsibility to protect.
Yes. So I think it is time. Responsibility to protect. That is specifically created. Actually, the main mandate is to use in a situation like this. So now, I think we can approach our MPs and keep bugging them all the time. And senators, hey, okay, you said officially that this is genocide. Are you going to do anything about it? How about you invoke R2P? Can we save, even if not all, some of these people? I think we can do that. So since I'm very overwhelmed and hopeless, but we also do have some smaller scale, just to hang on there, just not to give up. We have an educational project, a smaller project. I would like to throw it there. Unfortunately, our site is not up and constantly running. Maybe in about a week you will see it. Our site name is RA Canada, Rohingya Association Canada, racanada.org. We also have one of those publicly funding, what do you call, GoFundMe. This is Lunch Good. Lunch Good, we have one project called book printing. Our language was destroyed in Burma many hundred years ago, 300-400 years ago. We have been without a writing script, only oral we have. In 80s, some scholars have invented another one based on the original language. Now it has been going on, and some scholars, they're writing books. So $1, a copy will cost nearly $2. $1 can print 6 books. So in the Lunch Good side, Lunch Good / books, capital plural, book for Rohingya children.
And we'll send these websites and everything out on our
Yes, and it is not on the website, but I'm just saying the URL, but I will send the link to you. If you donate $1, we will be able to print 6 books. Actually, $2 we can print 13 books, booklet. And we have already supplied about 15,000 are on the way. We have supplied about 6,000 or so. We will need hundreds of thousands for children, and adults are also learning. That is another smaller thing that we're doing for survival day to day. And thank you, and I think that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much to all our panelists for providing your perspectives from deep within these atrocity situations that we only often get sort of fleeting and partial glimpses from the outside in our media. So thank you. I think you've really given us all a much better grasp of the situation, as well as what we can do to help, at least in some small part, in alleviating them and seeking justice for the victims. As Louisa said, places like East Turkestan, as well as Rakhine State, really should be understood as laboratories of repression. In war on terror discourse, these populations are often represented as backwards and being brought forward into history, but I think what we actually see is that these are sites that are, on the contrary, on the forefront of a dystopic future that's being created and unfolded before our eyes, and that as the Holocaust was perpetrated using techniques of killing and elimination that were perfected in European colonies, so too we now see how these techniques of repression being perfected in laboratories of extreme repression like East Turkestan and Rakhine State are being exported to other contexts. But inshallah, just as these techniques of repression develop, so too hopefully will our ability and our methods for resisting them, so that we won't have to resort to extreme exercises of military violence to prevent genocide in the future. So thank you to all of you for coming here today to be part of this conversation. This ends the formal portion of the evening, but please do continue to enjoy the delicious snacks and the cultural display that has been put on by some of our Uyghur sisters who are here with us today. They're sitting at that table over there if you would like to also go talk to them, and please give them a